My daughter forgot to hang up. I heard her say, "It's time to put him in assisted living. He's becoming too much to handle." I didn't respond, but in that instant, something deep inside me cracked. I sold the house for $890,000. When they returned from their trip looking cheerful, they walked right into a surprise. The keys wouldn't turn in the lock. On the porch sat a folded note. They read it, and their voices exploded into angry shouts. That's when I knew they weren't going to just walk away. This was only the opening move. But before we go any further, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're listening from. The phone rang just as I scraped the last bit of meatloaf from my plate. Margaret's meatloaf, though mine never came close without her touch. I glanced at the caller ID and couldn't help but smile. Rachel. Dad. How are you holding up? Her voice had that familiar warmth that always tightened my chest with a mix of love and loneliness. I settled into Margaret's old recliner, its leather worn smooth from decades of her evening reading. Oh, you know me, kiddo. Just wrapped up dinner and was about to catch the news. I didn't mention it was 3-day-old leftovers, or that I'd been staring at Margaret's picture on the mantel for over an hour. You eating enough? You know you can get groceries delivered now, right? I showed you how to use the app. I'm eating fine, I said. I eased in, keeping my tone light. Had a bit of a scare yesterday, though. Left the burner on under my coffee pot. Lucky I smelled it from the living room. There was a pause. I could picture her frowning the same crease between the brows she got from her mother. Dad, maybe we should think about having someone check on you more often. Colin thinks I'm doing just fine, Rachel. Really? How's your trip? You're in Phoenix, right? Yeah. Conference wraps tomorrow. Colin's been doing the client meetings while I sit through endless slides about digital marketing trends. She laughed, but it felt thin. Listen, Dad, I need to run. Colin and I have dinner with potential investors. Of course, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. Take care of yourself, okay? The line clicked, followed by muffled rustling. I figured she'd tossed the phone into her purse, but then I caught voices, faint but clear enough. Colin, you see how he's slipping. Rachel's tone was stripped of its warmth. He left the stove on yesterday. What if he burns the place down? My hand froze on the receiver. Cold spread through my chest. It's time for assisted living. Rachel, Colin said matter-of-fact. He's becoming a burden, and you know it. He's a good man, but he can't live alone anymore. That house must be worth close to $1 million. Rachel's voice shifted into calculation. With the Denver market, we could get $900,000 easy, maybe more. Exactly, Colin agreed. Sell it, get him somewhere decent but not pricey, and finally buy that Boulder place with the mountain view. Rachel laughed, actually laughed. God, Colin, you should have seen him tonight. So grateful just to hear from me. He has no idea. The longer we wait, the more mixed up he'll get. We should move before he starts questioning anything. The phone slipped from my hand, hitting the hardwood Margaret and I had laid together 23 years ago, each board nailed down with dreams for our family's future. I sat in the sudden quiet staring at Margaret's photo. Her eyes seemed to search mine with something I couldn't name, disappointment warning, or the sad knowing that belongs only to those who've already left this world. The grandfather clock in the hall, her anniversary gift 15 years ago, ticked steady in the deepening dusk. Outside the first spring, crickets began their song in the garden Margaret had planted, and I still kept alive. A cold, heavy weight settled in my chest, replacing the brief flicker of warmth I'd felt hearing my daughter's voice just minutes earlier. My hands, scarred and rough from decades swinging a hammer, slowly tightened into fists. They thought I was useless. They thought I was fading, incapable, ready to be tucked away somewhere out of sight. They were already counting the money, mapping out their shiny new life before I was even gone. But I was still breathing, and I was far more alert than they imagined. I don't know how long I sat in the dim room, Margaret's face gazing at me from the silver frame on the side table. The whole house felt altered now, as if the very walls had overheard my daughter's betrayal and were holding their breath. My knees wobbled when I finally rose and flicked on the lamp. Warm light spilled over the living room. We had built piece by piece, every item, the result of patience and sacrifice. The deep burgundy sofa where Rachel once curled up with her school books. The coffee table I'd made in the garage, smoothing every edge while she played nearby on the concrete floor. I stepped into the kitchen and slid open the drawer where I kept old paperwork. My fingers landed on the folder I was searching for without thinking. 2 decades of financial records kept because Margaret always said, "You never know when you might need them." There were the University of Colorado tuition receipts, $48,000 over 4 years. I remembered the double shifts coming home with sawdust in my hair and grit under my nails. Margaret would have a fresh pot of coffee waiting and rub my shoulders while I pored over bills at this very table. "Frank, you're working yourself into the ground?" she'd murmured one night, watching me figure out how to cover Rachel's spring semester. "She deserves better than we ever had, Margaret. She's smart enough to do anything I told her." Margaret had kissed the top of my head. "Just don't give her so much she forgets to be thankful." I should have listened. God help me, I should have listened. The wedding receipts were there too, $32,000 for a single day. I'd told Rachel we could handle $5,000, maybe $8,000 if we stretched. But she'd actually cried about wanting her dream wedding. I'd spent 6 straight months doing weekend flooring jobs for a buddy who paid cash under the table. "Daddy, you're the best father in the world," she'd whispered during our dance, her head resting on my shoulder, her gown brushing against my rented tux. She said she'd never forget. But she had. Just like she'd forgotten who co-signed for her first car when her credit was in the gutter. Just like she'd forgotten who made the calls to get her that marketing job when she'd been unemployed for 8 long months. I thumbed through bank statements from 2 years ago, right after Colin lost his job as a financial advisor, though they never told me exactly why. They'd moved in for a little while, just until he landed something new. I never charged them rent. I covered the spike in utilities, stocked the fridge for 3 adults instead of 1 widower. Colin would clap me on the shoulder and call me the most generous man in Colorado. Rachel would hug me and say, "Dad, we'll pay you back as soon as we're back on our feet." They'd been steady on their feet for over a year now. Good jobs, both earning more than I ever had, but they'd never once brought up moving out or paying me back. I thought about the $200 steakhouse dinner I'd picked up for their anniversary last month because Colin said they deserved to celebrate. Then there was the $3,000 I shelled out to replace the transmission in Colin's BMW, draining my emergency fund completely. "Frank's like a father to me," Colin had bragged to his friends at their last barbecue, an arm slung over my shoulder. I'm so lucky I married into this family. And I'd been proud, actually proud, to be the kind of father-in-law who always took care of his family, no matter the personal cost. I walked upstairs to the bedroom Margaret and I had shared untouched in the 2 years since she passed. Her jewelry box still rested on the dresser, her reading glasses folded neatly beside the lamp. I opened the bottom drawer where I kept our important documents and pulled out the original house deed. Frank and Margaret Doyle, purchased 1999. No liens, no co-signers, no red tape. Now the title was in my name alone. Standing in the very room where Margaret had spent her final days surrounded by everything we'd built together, I felt a shift deep inside. The hurt was still there, sharp as a jagged edge. But under it, something harder was setting in. They wanted to tuck me away and sell the home that carried our life's work. They thought I was too old, too forgetful, too content with scraps of their attention to put up a fight. I glanced at Margaret's photo on the nightstand, hearing her voice from years back. Don't give her so much she forgets to be grateful. Well, Margaret, our daughter, had certainly forgotten. But she was about to remember that her father wasn't as helpless as she believed. I went into my home office and pulled from the desk drawer a business card I'd held onto for 3 years, Todd Fisher, real estate attorney. Margaret had insisted we meet with him after her cancer diagnosis just to make sure everything was in order. Now it was time for another meeting. The next morning, I walked through my own house as if I were a stranger, but instead of seeing a home, I saw it through Rachel and Colin's eyes: square footage, resale value, liquid assets. In the kitchen, I let my hand slide across the granite countertops I had installed myself, working late into the night after my regular shift because we couldn't afford a contractor. Margaret had chosen the pattern speckled gray streaked with gold that caught the morning sun just right. She'd brewed coffee on that counter every morning for 16 years until cancer stole her strength. I remembered one Christmas morning when 3-year-old Rachel took her first shaky steps right there, toddling from the fridge to Margaret's waiting arms. We'd both cried with joy, Margaret lifting her up and spinning her around while I scrambled to grab the camera. Our baby's walking in our house, she'd whispered through tears. In the house we built for her. The living room carried 25 years of Christmas mornings. I could still see 7-year-old Rachel's face lighting up when she saw the dollhouse. I'd spent 3 months building it in the garage, working in secret after she went to bed. Margaret had sewn tiny curtains for the windows and crafted miniature furniture from fabric scraps and cardboard. "Daddy, it's just like our house," Rachel had squealed. And it was an exact replica right down to the little bay window for her bedroom. That bay window had cost me 6 months of overtime. Margaret had spotted the idea in a magazine and fallen in love with the thought of reading there in the afternoons. I'd taught myself to cut angles I'd never tried before, measuring and remeasuring until my back ached from crouching around the frame. "Frank, we can't afford this," Margaret had said when she saw me marking the wall. "You want it, you'll have it," I told her. "I'll make it work." I climbed the stairs to Rachel's old room, still painted the soft yellow she'd picked for her 16th birthday, still decorated with photos of high school friends and college snapshots. This was the room where I'd rocked her through sleepless, colicky nights, where Margaret and I had helped her puzzle through algebra problems at the small white desk I'd built to fit perfectly under the window. The master bedroom was the hardest. Margaret's side of the bed still had her water glass on the nightstand, her bookmark tucked into page 247 of the novel she never got to finish. I'd built those walk-in closets myself, tailoring them exactly to her height. Her clothes still hung there, carrying the faint trace of her perfume. This was the room where we had dreamed aloud about our future, whispered about Rachel's tomorrows, and where Margaret took her last breath with my hand in hers, the machines humming around us. "Promise me you won't let them take advantage of you," she'd whispered near the end, her voice as thin as paper. "You're too good, Frank. Too generous. Promise me you'll take care of yourself." I had promised. But looking at my life now, I hadn't kept that promise, had I? In my home office, I dug out the folder of construction photos Margaret had saved, snapshots of me pouring the foundation in the spring of 1999, 25 years younger and 50 pounds stronger. There I was with my crew raising the frame, sweat on our backs. And Margaret wearing a hard hat, far too big for her, bringing us lemonade on blistering afternoons. Her belly had just started to show with Rachel. The financial records from that era told the parts her photos didn't second mortgage a personal loan from my brother Margaret, working part-time at the school district to help cover materials. We'd eaten beans and rice for months. We drove cars patched together with duct tape and a prayer. But we built this house ourselves. Sweat, sacrifice, love, brick and beam for the life we were making. And now my own daughter, the baby who'd taken her first steps in this kitchen, the little girl who once played tag in the yard. I landscaped by hand, wanted to sell it all and tuck me away, like some outdated piece of furniture. I picked up Todd Fisher's business card from my desk drawer. Its edges were worn from 3 years of being turned over in my hands, but the phone number was still clear. Rachel and Colin thought they were dealing with a doddering old man, grateful for whatever crumbs of attention they tossed my way. They thought I was weak, ready to hand over everything I'd worked for without a word. They were about to find out how wrong they were. I dialed Todd's number and listened to the rings, my hands steady as stone. Outside, the spring sunlight was crisp and clear. The kind of day Margaret used to love, the kind of day that felt made for starting over. The law offices of Fisher & Associates sat on the second floor of a modest brick building along Colfax Avenue. The sort of place that helped everyday folks with real problems rather than impressing corporate giants. I wore my best suit, the charcoal gray one Margaret had chosen for me to wear to her funeral, and arrived 15 minutes early. My hands trembled only slightly as I signed in at reception. Todd Fisher was younger than I'd imagined, maybe mid-50s, with silver at his temples and the calm patience of someone who'd heard every kind of family disaster twice. His office was lined with shelves of law books and family photos. A wife, 2 teenagers, a golden retriever. The kind of solid, simple life Margaret and I had always wanted. "Mr. Doyle, good to see you again," he said, pouring coffee from a small machine in the corner, the aroma filling the air. "I remember you and Margaret from a few years back. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," I said, taking the cup, surprised at how steady my voice sounded. "I need to talk about something delicate, about my daughter and son-in-law." Todd eased into his chair, pen poised. "I'm listening." So I told him everything. The call, the overheard words, their plan to sell my home and ship me off to a nursing facility. Todd's expression barely shifted, but I caught him giving the smallest shake of his head when I described their eagerness to blow my money on a Boulder dream house. "Unfortunately, Mr. Doyle, this happens more often than you'd think," he said, leaning back. "Adult children often believe they know what's best for their aging parents, especially when there's property involved. But they can't actually do anything, can they?" "Not legally?" I asked. "Let's start with the basics. The house is titled in your name alone since your wife's passing, correct?" "That's right. Margaret and I owned it together, but when she died it passed to me automatically." "Then legally speaking, your daughter and son-in-law have absolutely no claim to your property. They can't sell it, can't force you into assisted living, can't touch a single dollar of your assets without your direct consent." Todd pulled a yellow legal pad from his drawer and began jotting notes. "The house is yours, period." Relief washed over me, followed quickly by something sharper. "So if I wanted to sell it myself?" "You could have it on the market tomorrow if you chose to," he said without looking up. "It's your property, your decision." Todd glanced at me. "May I ask why you're thinking about that?" I thought about Rachel's laugh when she'd called me a burden. About Colin's cold, calculating way of putting a price on my life. About 25 years of sacrifice boiled down to a property listing. They think I'm a confused old man they can manage like a bank account. My hands tightened around the coffee cup. Maybe it's time I show them exactly how sharp my mind still is. Todd studied me for a beat. "Denver's housing market is hot right now, especially in your area. Homes are selling in days, sometimes with cash offers over asking." He paused. "If you were serious about selling before your daughter and son-in-law got back, how fast could it happen? With the right buyer, plenty of investors would jump at your place. We could close in a week, maybe less." Todd leaned forward. "But Mr. Doyle, this is a big move. Once you sell, there's no undoing it. I built that house with my own hands, Mr. Fisher. Every board, every nail, every custom corner. I know exactly what I'm doing." We spent the next hour talking logistics, market estimates, investor networks, legal steps. Todd said he could have all the paperwork ready in 24 hours if I wanted to proceed. "The consultation fee is $200, he said as I stood to leave. If you go ahead with the sale, it'll be applied toward my legal costs. I paid him in cash, feeling more focused than I had in months. Out in the spring sunshine, walking toward my truck. My phone buzzed. Rachel's name lit the screen. For the first time since hearing her betrayal, I smiled. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I could see her in some Phoenix hotel lobby checking her watch, wondering why her grateful old father wasn't leaping to answer. Let her wonder. Let her and Colin keep plotting my future, my home, my life. They had no idea what was coming. The call kept ringing as I climbed into my truck, Todd Fisher's card safe in my wallet, a plan already forming in my head. I'd built my life from nothing once I could dismantle and rebuild it on my own terms again. The ringing finally stopped, but I knew she'd call back. She always did when she needed something. This time she'd get more than she bargained for. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the tremor in my hands was gone, replaced by something solid. Todd's words echoed in my head. It's your property, your decision. 25 years of self-doubt had lifted like the Denver fog burning off under the morning sun. I was unlocking my front door when the phone rang again. Through the window, I saw it buzzing on the kitchen counter where I'd left it. Rachel's name glowed on the screen. For the first time since she'd shown her true colors, I grinned. Let her stew, let her wonder. I poured myself a glass of water, took a slow breath, and picked up on the 6th ring. Dad, there you are. Rachel's voice bubbled with practiced cheer. I was starting to worry when you didn't answer earlier. Sorry, sweetheart. I was out running some errands. I kept my tone warm, the doting father. How's Phoenix treating you? Oh, you know how these business conferences go. But listen, I have wonderful news. She paused for effect. Colin and I have been planning something very special for you. My grip tightened on the phone. We want to treat you to a vacation. You deserve some rest and relaxation after everything since Mom passed. Her voice was syrupy with that fake sympathy I could now spot a mile away. There's this gorgeous place we found. It's like a resort, but with medical staff on hand, just in case you need anything. A resort with medical staff. My jaw tightened so hard I half expected to hear my teeth crack. That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. You really didn't need to go to so much trouble for me. Nonsense. Your family. Colin's voice chimed in from the background. Must have been on speakerphone. We've already handled everything. When were you thinking, I asked, though I already knew they wanted me gone before they even unpacked their bags from Phoenix. Well, we'll be back by next Friday, Rachel said. We were hoping you could be ready by then. Just pack clothes and personal things. You know the essentials. The essentials. Not the photo albums Margaret had arranged so carefully. Not the furniture I'd built with my own hands. Just enough for an old man they wanted tucked away and forgotten. Actually, Rachel, I have a surprise for you too when you get back. Oh, Dad, what kind of surprise? She sounded genuinely pleased, no doubt picturing a stack of signed papers or something to make her plan easier. I walked to the bay window I'd built for Margaret and looked out over the garden she had planted past the porch swing, where we'd spent countless evenings mapping out our dreams. It's something I've been working on since our last conversation. I think you'll be very surprised. You're so sweet, Dad. We'll talk about everything when we get home, okay? Get some rest. We'll take care of the rest. Sweet? She called me sweet while plotting to erase my life. I will, sweetheart. I love you. Love you too, Dad. See you Friday. The call ended, and I set the phone down with steadier hands than I'd had in weeks. I went to my home office, flipped open my laptop, and watched the glow spill across the desk like an open door to possibility. My fingers hovered for a second before typing real estate agents, Denver. The search results filled my screen like a fresh stockpile of ammunition for a war I was finally ready to wage. I'd always been methodical. 25 years as a construction engineer had taught me to research every detail before making a move. Tonight, that habit would serve an entirely new purpose. I scanned agent profiles, compared sale records and reviews, the way I used to compare bids from steel suppliers. Cherry Hills, Highlands Ranch, University Hills. Neighborhoods where houses sold for the kind of money Rachel and Colin were already spending in their fantasies. One name kept appearing in the top tier: Brian Connor, 43 specialist in fast sales, averaging 18 days from listing to closing. His headshot showed a sharp suit, confident eyes, and a smile that looked like it knew how to get deals done. Testimonials read like exactly what I needed to hear. Brian sold our home in 6 days, had a cash buyer in 48 hours. Smooth closing, 0 issues. I stared at his direct phone number, bold beneath his credentials. This was the turning point. Once I made this call, there would be no going back to being the grateful, pliable old man my daughter expected. Margaret's photo on my desk seemed to watch me. I could almost hear her. "Frank, are you sure about this?" I was. More sure than I'd been about anything since the day we buried her. I dialed the number with steady fingers. Brian Connor. Connor Real Estate. "How can I help you, Mr. Connor? My name's Frank Doyle. I'm looking to sell my house fast." "How quickly can something like that happen?" "Well, Mr. Doyle, that depends on a few factors. But with the right property and price, I've closed in as little as 10 days with cash buyers." "What kind of timeline are we talking?" 10 days. My pulse thudded hard in my chest. 10 days. "That quick?" "Absolutely," Brian said. "Denver's market is on fire right now, especially for well-kept homes in established neighborhoods." "Tell me a little about your place." I glanced around my kitchen, forcing myself to see it the way a buyer might. 2-story, 3,400 square feet, built in 99 Cherry Creek area. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths. I've kept it in excellent shape, did most of the work myself over the years. Brian's tone sharpened with interest. "That's exactly what several of my investors are after. Original owner, meticulously maintained, great neighborhood. Those are premium selling points. Would you want me to do a property assessment?" "How soon could you get here, if you're available?" "I could be there this afternoon." 3 o'clock. I checked the clock, just after noon. 3 works perfectly. "Let me give you the address." When I hung up, the kitchen felt unnaturally still. In 3 hours, a stranger would walk through the home Margaret and I had built from the ground up, assigning price tags to our history. The next 2 hours became a blur of movement. Old habits from Margaret's company as coming days took over. Everything had to be spotless. I dusted the bay windows, straightened every throw pillow, polished surfaces until they shone. But this wasn't cleaning for guests. It felt like prepping for an execution. Right on the dot, the doorbell rang. I smoothed my shirt, inhaled the faint lavender from the sachets Margaret kept in the linen closet, and walked toward the door. My hand shook just slightly as it closed over the brass knob I'd installed myself 15 years ago. On the other side of this door was either my salvation or my downfall. I turned the handle. Brian Connor looked exactly like his online photo professional, yet approachable, early 40s, carrying a leather portfolio and a tablet. His eyes widened as soon as he stepped in. "Wow." He paused in the entryway, gaze tracing the crown molding I'd crafted by hand, then dropping to the hardwood floors Margaret and I had chosen together. "Mr. Doyle, this is exactly what I was hoping for." I watched him take in the space, the afternoon light spilling through Margaret's bay window, the open flow from living room to dining room. Something I'd achieved by removing a load-bearing wall and installing a support beam. His appreciation seemed genuine, the kind of professional respect that couldn't be faked. "You weren't kidding about keeping this place up." He pulled out his tablet and started snapping photos. "These hardwood floors original, installed them myself in 2001, I said. 3/4-inch solid oak. Margaret wanted something that would outlast us, and she was right. I felt myself sliding into the familiar rhythm of talking shop, the pride still there despite everything. And this kitchen, Brian stopped at the granite counter, running his hand over the edge. Custom install every inch. Margaret picked the slab. Said the gold veining reminded her of sunlight. My voice caught before I pushed on. Took me 3 weekends to get the measurements just right. He typed notes into his tablet, testing outlets, opening cabinets, running water with the precision of someone who knew exactly what buyers wanted. Mr. Doyle, I have to be honest. In 15 years, I rarely see a property maintained at this level. I'm an engineer, was an engineer. I believe in building things right the first time. It shows. He nodded toward the living room. May I followed as he stepped in, admiring the open floor plan, the built-in shelves I'd crafted beside the fireplace, and the way Margaret's decorating had transformed my construction project into a home. This bay window custom work, built it for my wife. She always dreamed of a reading nook. I could still see Margaret there in the afternoons, a mug of tea beside her, her mystery novels balanced on her lap, reading glasses sliding down her nose. Brian knelt, tape measure, snapping out his energy, practically humming. Mr. Doyle, I want to show you something. He pulled up his tablet, swiping through photos of recent listings. Homes like yours in this neighborhood are selling between $850,000 and $920,000. The number hit me like a jolt, far higher than the figure Rachel and Colin had tossed around so casually during that awful conversation. Given the condition and all the custom touches you've added, I'd suggest we list at $80,000. That'll keep it attractive to buyers, but still get you top dollar. $890,000? I lowered myself into Margaret's favorite chair, the one she'd claimed for her reading spot. My head spun. Brian grinned. Mr. Doyle, you're sitting on a gold mine. This kind of property doesn't hit the market often, especially in this shape. I actually have an investment group that's been hunting for something exactly like this. What kind of investment group? They focus on upscale rentals in established areas. They pay cash, no bank financing, no repair negotiations. We could close in 10 business days. 10 business days. Rachel and Colin would be back from Phoenix in 8, expecting to find me all packed and docile, ready to be parked in their resort. What's the catch? Why so quick? Brian's smile was calm, practiced. No catch. Cash deals move fast because there's no mortgage process, no appraisal delays. They'll do their own inspection, but honestly, your place is in better condition than most brand new builds I've seen. I glanced around the living room, the same space where Rachel had taken her first steps, where Margaret and I had hosted decades of Christmas mornings, where Sunday afternoons were spent side by side with the paper. How soon would I have to move out? Standard is 30 days after closing. But this group's flexible. The main thing is getting a clear title and the paperwork done. I thought of Rachel's syrupy voice calling me sweet, while plotting to erase me from my own home. I thought of Colin's cold, calculated way of turning me into an obstacle to be handled. And I heard Margaret's voice, her old warning about being too generous, too trusting. Let's do it. For just a second, Brian's polished real estate mask slipped, showing pure excitement. Excellent choice, Mr. Doyle. I'll call them right now. I listened as he described my home, like a rare treasure, Cherry Creek area, original owner. Pristine condition, custom features throughout. When he hung up, he was smiling wide. They want to move forward immediately. I can have contracts ready by tomorrow morning. The sunset poured through Margaret's bay window, bathing the room in gold. I'd just agreed to sell 25 years of my life. And yet, for the first time since Rachel's betrayal, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Control. How does 9 a.m. sound? The question hung in the air as the grandfather clock, Margaret's 15th anniversary gift, ticked in the hall. 9 a.m. sounds perfect. When Brian left with promises of contracts and a closing timeline, I stood in the stillness of the home that would soon be someone else's. The evening light felt like a photograph, warm, fleeting, precious. But it wasn't sadness filling my chest. It was anticipation. Brian showed up the next morning, contracts in hand, a notary by his side, and coffee for everyone, the kind of efficiency I'd always respected. I read every word the way I used to pore over blueprints, checking every detail. Sale price $890,000. Cash deal. Closing in 10 business days. The notary, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes, guided me through each signature. Minimal contingencies, just the title search and final walkthrough. And I can stay 30 days after closing if I need to. That's correct, Mr. Doyle. Most folks prefer to clear out sooner after a sale. Peace of mind, they call it. Peace of mind. I almost laughed out loud. The only peace I was looking forward to was seeing the expressions on Rachel and Colin's faces when they realized what their so-called burden had done. I signed my name with a steady hand, and just like that, the wheels were in motion. The first 3 days blurred into a stream of paperwork and inspections. The title company dug through decades of records. The buyers sent in their crew, a polite bunch who complimented my handiwork and couldn't find a single fault. Your father-in-law sure knew what he was doing, one of them said to their attorney, assuming I'd already moved out. These floors, this electrical, everything's top-notch. Days 4 through 6, I worked like a man on a secret mission. I scoured apartment listings looking for someplace small, but comfortable, a place to start fresh with nearly $900,000 in the bank. I found a spot in Highlands, a senior community with a golf course and a clubhouse, the kind of place Margaret and I used to talk about for our retirement years. I also called storage units, figuring out which of Margaret's things I'd keep and which I'd have to leave behind for the new owners. Her china, definitely, her jewelry box, the photo albums, the real markers of a life we'd built together. By days 7 through 9, I felt a strange confidence I hadn't known in years. Each morning I woke up knowing I was one step closer to proving Rachel wrong, showing her that her confused old dad was sharper than she ever imagined. Mrs. Patterson from next door noticed the cars and inspectors coming and going. She asked what was going on. I told her it was just some work being done. A half-truth, but the full truth would race through the neighborhood faster than I was ready for. On day 8, Brian called with the final word. Everything's set for tomorrow's closing, Mr. Doyle. The buyers are thrilled with the inspection. Wire transfer will hit your account the same day. That night I packed a single suitcase, not because I was leaving yet, but because I wanted to be ready for anything. I looked at Margaret's photo on the dresser and whispered, I hope you understand why I'm doing this. Friday dawned bright and crisp. The kind of spring morning Margaret always said showed Denver at its best. I dressed in my Navy suit, not the one from her funeral, but the one she bought me for Rachel's college graduation. The title office was pure business, efficient, polite, congratulatory. The buyer's attorney, a sharp woman with a hawk's eye for detail, went over each document twice. Brian guided the process like a conductor leading an orchestra. Mr. Doyle, sign here, and initial there. Each signature felt like snapping another chain. The deed transfer, the settlement statement, the final acknowledgement that 1247 Maple Street no longer belonged to Frank Doyle. And here's your wire confirmation, $890,000 less closing costs deposited straight into your account. I stared at the numbers. More money than I'd ever had at one time. More money than Rachel and Colin had ever imagined their burden could access. We shook hands all around. Brian walked me out to my truck, telling me, You made the right move, Mr. Doyle. Sometimes a fresh start is exactly what we need. I drove past streets I'd known for 25 years, past the elementary school where Rachel learned to read, past the park, where Margaret and I used to walk hand in hand on Sunday mornings. But instead of nostalgia, I felt light. Pulling into the driveway, I sat in the truck, staring at the house that no longer belonged to me. The keys felt heavy in my palm. Tomorrow I'd hand them over to strangers and walk away. Rachel and Colin would be back from Phoenix in 3 days, expecting to find their agreeable old dad ready to be treated to their resort plan. Instead, they'd walk into an empty house and a lesson they wouldn't forget. I stepped out of the truck, phone in hand, ready to make the next call in a plan working better than I'd hoped. The engine clicked as it cooled. I just sat there for a moment looking at the place I'd built with my own hands, a place now belonging to someone else. But I still had 30 days access, plenty of time to finish what I'd started. I pulled into the Starbucks lot on Fax Avenue, my grip steady as I punched in directory assistance for a 24-hour locksmith. The emergency rate was an extra $200, but at this point money wasn't an issue. Emergency locksmith Eddie speaking. I need every lock in my house changed today. It's urgent. What kind of timeline are we talking, sir? As soon as you can get here. I'll pay cash. 2 hours? I rattled off my address and headed back home. Sitting in my truck, I watched Mrs. Patterson watering her flowers next door. She gave a cheerful wave. I waved back, feeling a pinch in my chest, knowing I was keeping her and everyone else completely in the dark. Eddie showed up in a van loaded with tools, a man in his 50s, with the look of someone who'd seen every type of lock crisis Denver could throw at him. Security problem, he asked, eyeing the front door. New ownership situation. Better safe than sorry. He nodded like it was a story he'd heard before and went to work. I stood by as he dismantled the locks I'd installed a decade and a half ago, the brass hardware Margaret had chosen because it matched the door knocker. These are solid locks, Eddie said, turning one over in his hand. Somebody knew what they were doing. That was me. I like things built to last. The replacements were brushed silver sleek instead of classic. When Eddie tested them, the click was sharper, more mechanical than the old set. Here you go, sir, 3 copies each. Front door, back door, and garage side entry. The keys felt strange in my palm. That'll be $450, including the emergency fee. I counted out cash, making sure there'd be no trail leading back to Frank Doyle. Once Eddie's van disappeared down the street, I stepped into my empty house and started the hardest part, fitting 25 years of my life into what I could carry. Margaret's jewelry box went in first, followed by our wedding photos and the novel she'd been reading when she passed bookmark, still resting on page 247. My engineering certificates. Important paperwork. Margaret's favorite cookbook with her handwritten notes curling in the margins. Almost everything else stayed. The furniture that told our story. The photo albums from Rachel's childhood. Margaret's dresses still hanging in our closet, faintly scented with her perfume. While I packed, I called Sunset Manor Apartments. I need a furnished 1-bedroom as soon as possible. We have a lovely unit available immediately, said Mrs. Chen, the property manager. Month-to-month lease if you'd like flexibility. I'll take it. An hour later, I met her at the complex, a tidy, low-rise building for seniors, complete with a community room and manicured lawns. The unit was small, but fully furnished with just enough for me to start over. Cash deposit is fine, Mr. Doyle. When would you like to move in tonight? Her brows lifted slightly, but she didn't press. I signed the lease and handed over the first month's rent, plus the deposit, nearly $3,000 that 2 weeks ago I would have agonized over spending. As the dusk settled in and I loaded my car, I spotted Mrs. Patterson watching me from her window. She waved once more, and I felt the full weight of the ties I was cutting. The friendships, the neighborly bonds connections Rachel and Colin had pushed me toward abandoning. I took one last slow walk through the now empty rooms, my footsteps echoing differently, as if the walls themselves knew the house no longer belonged to me. The kitchen where Margaret once stood, guiding Rachel's little hands through Christmas cookie dough. The living room where Rachel used to rip into presents under the glow of twinkling lights. Our bedroom where Margaret took her final breath with my hand in hers. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I said aloud to her memory. "But you'd understand. You always told me I was too generous for my own good." I locked the brand new deadbolts and drove away from Maple Street. Maybe for the last time, my rearview mirror filled with a lifetime I was leaving behind. The sun dipped low as I pulled into the lot at Sunset Manor, my car packed with what I now considered my essentials. I carried my suitcase to my new door, fumbling slightly with the unfamiliar keys. Inside the apartment felt like a motel room, functional, impersonal, with the faint chemical scent of carpet cleaner. I set my bag down and reached for my phone. The last phase of my plan required one more call, one final move that would give Rachel and Colin a shock they'd never see coming. Margaret's framed photo was already on the nightstand, watching as I weighed which bank could best protect nearly $900,000 from the children who thought it was theirs by right. Sitting at the small dining table, I opened my laptop and began searching for banks known for personal service and discretion. Colorado Community Bank caught my attention, smaller than the big-name chains, with a reputation for handling large deposits quietly. Exactly what I needed. Colorado Community Bank Private Banking Division. This is David Morrison. Mr. Morrison, my name is Frank Doyle. I need to open an account for a substantial deposit, around $890,000. There was the briefest pause, the kind where you can hear someone mentally reshuffling their day. "We'd be absolutely delighted to work with you, Mr. Doyle. When would be a good time for a consultation? Monday morning, 9 a.m. "Perfect. I'll have everything ready." The weekend stretched before me like unmarked territory. I'd never lived anywhere but the house Margaret and I built. This small apartment felt like exile, but it was exile on my terms. Saturday morning, I brewed coffee in the unfamiliar kitchenette and unpacked with quiet precision. Margaret's jewelry box went on the dresser. My engineering awards on the bookshelf. Our wedding photo beside the bed where I'd now sleep alone in a place she had never seen. A grocery run yielded simple one-person meals, nothing requiring the kind of kitchen magic Margaret had loved. The cashier, a young man with kind eyes, asked if I was new around here. "Just moved in," I told him, starting fresh. Sunday, I found a coffee shop just 3 blocks away. Brews and Views. The barista, Sarah, with streaks of purple in her hair, poured my kind of strong coffee. "You're new to the neighborhood," she said, friendly but not nosy. "Retired engineer," I told her, "looking for a quieter life." "You found the right place for that. Folks here are pretty laid back." I sat by the window watching people walk dogs, push strollers, ordinary weekend life. It was the kind of scene Margaret and I had cherished. But instead of feeling sad, I felt something sharper. Anticipation. Monday morning, I put on my best suit, not the one for funerals, but the navy Margaret bought for Rachel's college graduation, and drove to Colorado Community Bank. David Morrison was younger than I expected, maybe mid-40s, with the easy warmth of someone used to handling people's life savings. "Mr. Doyle, what brings you to Colorado Community Bank?" "I recently sold my house. I'm looking for a fresh start with a bank that values relationships over fees." He nodded like he understood exactly what I meant. "We specialize in that kind of service. Tell me more about your needs." I explained my situation carefully, a widower who had sold his home and wanted security without hassle. He asked the right questions without prying too far. "We can initiate the wire transfer today," he said. "Funds should clear by Wednesday." He prepared the paperwork with quiet efficiency. Checking debit card checkbook, all standard. But he also recommended a premium account for added security. I signed the documents that made me customer number 847293 with access to nearly $900,000 that Rachel and Colin would never touch. Tuesday and Wednesday unfolded with my new routine. Morning coffee at Brews and Views. Sarah remembered my order and casually asked how my weekend went. Afternoons found me wandering the neighborhood, eventually stumbling upon a little park where other retirees sat on benches feeding pigeons or flipping through newspapers. On Wednesday, the call I'd been waiting for finally came. "Mr. Doyle, your funds have cleared successfully. Your account is fully active." David Morrison's voice carried that crisp satisfaction of a job completed. I hung up and glanced around my modest apartment. Margaret's picture smiling from the nightstand, my few belongings in their places, the start of a life rebuilt from the ashes of my own daughter's betrayal. For the first time since losing Margaret, I felt in control, really in control of my own fate. That evening, I sat in my plain functional chair. Not Margaret's reading nook, not the recliner where I'd overheard Rachel plotting my disposal. Just a chair that belonged solely to me. I opened my laptop and typed mini surveillance cameras into the search bar. My fingers paused over the keys, aware that what I was about to buy would record the final act of my payback. Rachel and Colin would be back on Friday, expecting their compliant old father ready to be looked after. Instead, they'd learned their so-called burden had turned into their biggest nightmare. Page after page of search results appeared, everything from obvious outdoor security setups to cameras hidden inside household items. After 30 minutes of comparing specs, I found the perfect choice, a wireless mini camera concealed inside what looked like an ordinary phone charger. It checked every box for my engineer's brain: Wi-Fi connected, controlled by a smartphone app, motion-triggered recording, 12-hour battery, crisp, high-definition video. Best of all, it could live stream to my phone from anywhere, with an internet signal. I paid the extra $40 for overnight delivery, bringing the total to $149, a sum that 2 weeks ago would have made me think twice. Now it was nothing. With the camera ordered, I moved on to the next critical step, the letter. The first draft came out too raw, spilling my anger all over the page. The second felt too detached, too cold for the personal devastation they'd caused. By the third try, I found the balance polite but cutting, loving but final. In the careful handwriting Margaret used to praise Mao, I wrote, "Dear Rachel and Colin, if you're reading this, it means my plan worked perfectly. I heard your phone call about putting me in a nursing home because I'm a burden. I heard you calculating how much money you'd get from selling my house. That house has already been sold, $890,000 in cash. The money is in my new bank account where it will stay. I've moved somewhere I'm appreciated, not merely tolerated. Don't worry about me. Worry about where you're going to live. Your things have been packed and stored at Denver Moving and Storage on K-Fax Avenue. You have 30 days to pick them up before storage fees begin. For 42 years, I gave you everything I had. You repaid me by planning to discard me so you could take what I built. I hope the lesson was worth the cost. Love, Dad." Thursday morning, the FedEx driver handed me a small box. I spent an hour at my kitchen counter testing the camera, learning the app. The video was razor sharp. The audio could catch even a murmur. That afternoon, I drove to the old house for the last time, using the garage opener Rachel and Colin never knew I'd kept. Parking inside kept curious neighbors from asking questions. My grip tightened as I unlocked the front door with my new keys. The scent hit me first. Margaret's lavender sachets, the lemon oil I'd used on the wood, the lingering ghost of 25 years' worth of dinners. But now, there were intrusions, their suitcases at the foot of the stairs, a scatter of unopened mail on the kitchen counter. They'd been treating my home like their personal storage locker while plotting my exile. I plugged the charger camera into the outlet beside the front door, adjusting it until my phone app showed the whole entryway in view. Perfect, anyone stepping inside would be recorded, including the moment they spotted the envelope taped right at eye level. I tested the motion detection by stepping in and out until I was sure it would catch every second. Before leaving, I stood in the living room one last time, resting my hand on the mantel where Margaret's picture had stood for more than 2 decades. Soon strangers would place their own memories here. "It's done, sweetheart," I whispered to her. Justice served. I locked up, checked the live feed from my car, and drove back to my apartment ready for Friday. The motion sensor was armed, the battery fully charged, and my phone ready to alert me the second Rachel and Colin realized their keys no longer fit. Back in my apartment, I settled into my chair, phone in hand, watching the empty doorway of my former home through the camera app. The timestamp read 6:30 p.m., Thursday evening. Tomorrow they'd roll back from their trip, likely chatting about which nursing facility would best suit me, and mentally spending what they believed was already theirs. They had no clue their compliant old dad had turned into their worst nightmare. Friday morning, I woke with the anticipation of a man about to witness long overdue justice. Even my coffee tasted richer. The small apartment didn't feel as cramped as I settled into my chair, the camera feed showing nothing but the silent entryway. By 4:30 p.m., I knew they were close. Rachel always insisted on leaving Phoenix before noon to dodge traffic. And Colin, ever the cautious driver, stuck to the speed limit like gospel. Within the hour, they'd be pulling into that driveway. I glanced at Margaret's photo on the nightstand. I hope you understand what I'm doing, sweetheart. They left me no choice. At 5:15, my phone vibrated, motion detected. Colin's black SUV rolled into the driveway. My heart pounded as Rachel stepped out first, stretching after the long drive. Colin came around unloading their suitcases. They walked toward the front door with the ease of people certain they were home. Rachel fished her keys from her purse, slid one into the lock I'd replaced the day before, and it stopped cold. She frowned, jiggled it again. That's weird. My keys aren't working. Colin moved in his tired look, tightening into concern. Let me try the back door. He vanished around the side while Rachel kept working the front lock. When he returned a few minutes later, his face was tight. Back door's locked too, and the garage opener's dead. Rachel's voice sharpened. What? That's impossible. Dad doesn't even know any locksmiths. Colin leaned in, studying the hardware. His financial advisor's instincts kicked in. These locks are brand new. This wasn't a mistake. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and dialed my old landline. After several unanswered rings, she frowned deeper. It's not even going to voicemail. Try his cell, Colin said. He doesn't have one, remember? We talked about getting him one for emergencies. A hint of fear cracked her voice. Colin moved to check the windows. That one's unlocked. I'll give you a boost. Through my phone, I watched Rachel awkwardly climb through the kitchen window, her business suit catching on the frame. Moments later, the front door swung open from inside. Colin stepped in with their luggage and froze. The envelope was taped to the door, my handwriting spelling out both their names. Rachel's hands shook as she tore it open. Colin leaned over her shoulder, their faces shifting confusion, then disbelief, then outright horror. He sold the house. Rachel blurted, her voice rising. How could he do this to us? Colin snatched the letter, rereading it as if the words might rewrite themselves. That manipulative old bastard. He was playing us the whole time. 890,000. Rachel's eyes welled, streaking her makeup. He kept it all. That was supposed to be our future. Your future, Colin snapped, the mask gone. This is your father, Rachel. You should have handled this better. My fault. You're the one who said he was becoming a burden. You're the one who pushed for the nursing home. Well, he was a burden, and look what he's done to us. Colin waved around the space that wasn't theirs anymore. We're homeless. Our lease is up next week. The irony made me smile. They'd plotted to make me homeless, and now they were the ones panicking over where to go. Call a lawyer, Rachel demanded. There has to be something we can do. He can't just sell the house without telling us. With what money? Colin shot back. In case you forgot, I lost my job 6 months ago, and your salary barely covers the car payments. Then get another job. where financial firms aren't lining up to hire advisors who got fired for shady transactions. I watched Rachel's face crumble as reality landed: no house, no inheritance, no savings, and a husband no one would hire. "How could he be so cruel?" she whispered. "Same way you were cruel when you called him a burden and tried to stick him in a home," Colin said bitterly. "The old man's smarter than both of us." Through the feed, I saw them sink into my old furniture that would be gone tomorrow when the new owners moved in. Rachel buried her face in her hands. Colin just stared at the note beaten. I shut off the camera. I'd seen enough. In my kitchen, I opened the last bottle of Margaret's favorite wine, a 2018 Bordeaux we'd been saving for a special occasion. I poured a glass, raised it toward her photo. "To you, my love, justice served." The wine slid down smooth, tasting every bit like victory. They'd just learned the hard way what happens when you bite the hand that's been feeding you for years. My phone buzzed a text from an unfamiliar number. Probably Rachel scrambling to reach me through some new channel. I didn't bother opening it. I hit delete and powered the phone off for good. I walked over to the window, gazing at the Denver skyline bathed in the warm gold of the setting sun. Somewhere across this city, my daughter and her husband were sitting in my former living room, stewing in the consequences of their own cruelty. In those same walls, they once planned my exile. They were discovering that their burden had turned into their biggest nightmare. For the first time since Margaret's funeral 2 years ago, I felt unshackled. No one's problem. No one's responsibility. Just me, my own man again. My money. My decisions. My future stretched out ahead like a long, open highway. Frank Donovan had walked away for good, and he wasn't ever coming back.